Hello again, ladies and gents, and to interrupt for the next 15, 20 minutes or so, as the regulars amongst us will know, for today's Q&A and our guest speaker. And delighted that Kaija Larke is joining us today. And Kaija's got a fantastic story. And like most of our guest speakers, they've got an interesting background to share, an interesting story, and hopefully some insight and some inspiration to share with you. And Kaija's had 20 years in the broadcasting industry, and a lot of those were spent on the front line as a defence reporter for the British Forces Broadcasting Service. But before that, has been with the BBC Radio 5 Live, the World Service, ITN. So we'll hear about Kaija's journey, and I'll invite her onto the screen with me. So that should be coming through to you, Kaija. Kaija, hello.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
A little nervous, I have to say. It's very strange being on the receiving end of the interview questions today.
Absolutely. And I will just say before we start that if anyone has any questions, to use the Q&A area on the right-hand side rather than the chat box. That's where I'll pick those up. So if you have any questions as we go, feel free to do that, and I'll pick it up as we go along, or we can do them at the end. But Kaija, delighted that you've joined us, and comes at a time where you've started a business in recent months, over the last few months, and we'll get onto that. But really, it's the story and the journey that you've had in the broadcasting world. As I mentioned, you've spent a number of years in the broadcasting world as a journalist and in news, entertainment. But I think it's the defence work that's probably gathers most interest. So, talk us a little bit about your background, and when was that moment when you went from news and entertainment to working on the front line?
Well, it all actually started when I was about 14, weirdly enough, when I got my first byline in the local newspaper. For me, I'd only ever wanted to be a journalist. And it was around that time that the first Gulf War was happening. And Kate Adie was trailblazing on the front line herself. And I turned around to my mum and said, that's what I want to do. And yeah, as a young girl growing up in Great Yarmouth, it was a world away from my childhood. But I pursued it. I only ever kind of went down the journalism route. After university, worked in commercial radio and various stations, as you mentioned, and then had the opportunity. I'd been working at the BBC as staff. I'd left to go freelance, and BFBS, British Forces Broadcasting Service, were looking to improve and enhance their freelance pool. So I was asked if I'd like to go and do some freelance work with them. I'd been working with the military already, actually doing media training. And so I deployed on a few military exercises. So I had an understanding, a kind of base level understanding of how the armed forces operated. And so I started out freelancing with them. And then an opportunity arose to join them as staff. And at that point, I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to do it because I was really enjoying the mix, but I really, really wanted to deploy to Afghanistan. And so I did join them. They weren't sending freelancers at that point. So I did jump at the opportunity then to join. And a few months later, headed off to Afghanistan, but not before having headed home to tell my mum that that's what I was about to do. And I think at the time she thought I was heading home to tell her that I just got engaged. So she got a little bit of a shock when I actually said, no, sorry, actually off to the war zone.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I went out to Afghan in early 2010 and stayed out there for 3.5 months reporting on the armed forces.
Fantastic. And you've been Afghanistan, Iraq, Africa, Russia, into the Americas. It's taken you all over. And I like the line that we spoke last week. And you've since over the last few months started your own media and video production company. And you've said you've gone from being shot at on the front line to shooting people, which I really like. But talk us through some of those experiences. What really stands out for you? Because if people Google you, probably one of the first images that comes up is you in your bulletproof vest with your helmet on, with a camera and a microphone in around you. So tell us through some of those experiences. What are some of the memorable experiences that stand out from reporting on the front line?
Yes, so many. I say to people now, I really wish that I had more photographs from that time, because my Instagram feed would be amazing. Whereas at the time we were just sort of, cracking on with the job really. And I've got very few photos. But yeah, Afghanistan obviously was a huge highlight. That photograph that you refer to was taken, it's actually a screenshot from a marketplace in Shawal in Helmand. And it was just after a huge offensive operation by British and NATO forces to clear the Taliban from this area. We were in a few days later staying with one Royal Welsh in this little dusty forward operating base that they had, sleeping out on a dusty floor, essentially on what I would glamorously call a veranda, but it was very far from that. You were, using a solar shower, going out, using a bag to, go to the toilet in. It was the least glamorous, location you can possibly imagine. But it was amazing. And the guys that we were with really looked after us. And we went out on this foot patrol. We'd done several foot patrols already. We did them regularly. And we went out on this foot patrol to see the marketplace that they had cleared. And as part of this operation had reopened so that the locals could trade, and people would walk for days and days to come and do, trade their business at this marketplace. And it was about a third open at that point, if that. It had previously had about 1,000 stalls. I mean, it's a huge site. And as we went in, the soldier that was leading the foot patrol sort of said, "Are you sure you want to go in?" And I was like, "Yes." So we had a little chat about it. I said, "If you think you can get us in and you can get us out alive, then I want to go in." And so Claire, who I was working with, we agreed we'd go. And then partway through us being in there, we were trying to talk to locals, and they wouldn't talk to us because they were terrified because the Taliban were watching us. And so they wouldn't appear on camera. And I said, "Okay, what do you mean the Taliban are watching us?" "No, they're watching us right now. They're actually watching us from outside the marketplace." "Okay, might be time to leave." And as we followed the soldiers out, they then found a suspected IED device on the pathway out. So we all had to lay on the ground, and there was this real feeling of being sitting ducks laying there. But everything was fine. It wasn't, thankfully, an IED, and off we went. And that was, that kind of really taught me quite a lot that day about how the military operated in those environments, and how well they looked after us. So that was, there were so many amazing experiences in Afghanistan, and we really saw at that point the security improving and changing. Unfortunately, obviously, things sort of have changed subsequently. But then, after that, I was the last embed reporter in Iraq with the Royal Marines before we pulled out officially there. And so we were watching them training the Iraqis on new boats that they've been provided with by the Americans to protect their oil platform, which is where the bulk of their GDP comes from. And I was the first foreign journalist on a Russian submarine post the Cold War, which was absolutely phenomenal. And that was about 6 years ago. And it seems almost unbelievable now that, the Russians were on a NATO exercise, really, fully entrenched with that operation at the time, with that exercise at the time. And we were allowed on the Russian submarine. And we had, we'd been on the Russian ship beforehand doing shots of vodka with the captain at the captain's table. And then we were taken across on a rib and had to climb down into the submarine. It was just, amazing times. But yeah, different world now.
A lot of us can't really relate to the fact that we make a lot of decisions during our day, but not all are life and death. And that's clearly what you were faced with on a regular basis. Andrew Siegel asked during that, actually, what is the most amazing, dangerous, bizarre experience you've had? Would one of those be it, or would there be another standout?
Well, that actually, while we were, some hugely amazing times, even from covering things like the D-Day commemorations and the Dunkirk commemorations, where you're speaking to the old veterans, to being in a helicopter over Kenya when the troops were training out for their deployments to Afghanistan, and we were getting some aerial shots from a helicopter and spotted a herd of elephants. And we were circling over these elephants in Kenya. And it was, that was amazing. But probably what felt potentially like one of the most dangerous was when we were still in Shual with the Royal Welsh. And a couple of days later, the compound next to us came under attack. And we were actually sat at the time cross-legged on the floor eating goat stew with the Afghan colonel that was there and a few of his guys. And all of a sudden, literally all hell broke loose. And we were not with our body armor or our helmets, or we were just sat in fatigues and a shirt, and we turned around and everybody else on the base was fully kitted up, weapons on, everything, and there was just this huge gunfight going on. And we had to say to somebody, could you possibly just pass us our body armor, please? feeling a little bit vulnerable sitting here, but thankfully the British, French and Afghans, saw them off, and yeah, we were all safe, and we carried on for a few more days there.
And a very quick one that's relevant to the point you made, Judith Allen asked, were you glad of the vodka shots before you went on the submarine?
Well, the cameraman actually had to decline a couple because he was worried that the images wouldn't be all that clear. But yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah, it made it an interesting climb up and down the side of the submarine.
Very authentic. And Kai, you've met some brilliant people, and even the inspirational veterans that you've referenced there, but you've met presidents, prime ministers, royalty. Who stands out for you? Who has perhaps made the most impact on sort of your time? Who's been perhaps the most inspiring or person that you've met?
Well, I guess can I have two answers to that?
Yeah, of course.
So one, I've had the pleasure a couple of times actually of meeting Kate Adie, which was amazing, and obviously the kind of childhood dream come true, and she was as delightful as you would imagine her to be. So that was a really special moment. I met her at Russi in London the first time. And then when Prince Charles came out to Afghanistan to see the troops, and he was so down to earth, and he was wonderful. And there was a few journalists out actually at that point. There was a couple of people from the BBC and Sky that were there obviously to cover his visit, and he took a considerable amount of time after the interviews and after his time with the troops to actually talk to us and to find out what we were doing, how we found it, particularly Claire and myself who were there for BFBS. And he just took a really genuine interest in us. And I've covered a lot of events with royalty, and often you're there, obviously just as a spectator, and they're talking to, all the important people. But it was really nice that particular day for him to take time out for us.
Lovely. And Shirley Price asks, Kai, do you miss the adrenaline rush that you must have had covering these stories? What do you miss from
Yeah, of course. I do, but I still work with NATO on a reasonably regular basis. So I still cover their military exercises, and it's a little bit different now because they're often UK based. But the last one, I was away for 6 weeks in the autumn, and did manage to bag myself a helicopter ride, so that was quite nice. But that was over Newquay, so it was a little bit different. But yeah, I think there's been obviously, like I say, tanks, helicopters, submarines, warships, American warships, the whole kind of shebang, and it was an amazing, fantastic time, and always really well looked after. But it got to a point for me personally where I wanted to move on and do something else.
Fantastic. And that's a perfect way to end that, because we'll talk about that transition, and we'll talk about what was your inspiration behind starting your business, because as an agency, you are working with the armed forces community still, and you are documenting a lot of veterans and soldiers' transitions out of life, and you're using your experience in the media to do that work with not just armed forces, but companies and other bits and pieces. But so what was your inspiration behind starting a business? Because that in some respect is as scary as probably being on the front line.
Well, it wasn't actually, funnily enough. It sounds really bad to say it, but I kind of didn't have a big grand plan. I knew that I needed to leave my job, and I've got 2 young children, and I returned to work after both pregnancies, but I wasn't doing as much travel at all. And so I decided that I'd had enough of spending a lot of my life on the M25, and which really didn't get the adrenaline going. And so I left with no life plan, to be perfectly honest. I'd previously left my staff job at the BBC, so I knew I could freelance. I wasn't scared of that going out alone aspect. And then I was approached by Help for Heroes, and through various conversations with them, I'd obviously done a lot of work with them in my defence reporting days. And they asked me if I would do some video content for them for the Invictus Games. And did I have all my own kit? So I said yes. I didn't have any of it at the time. Promptly went out and bought several £1,000s worth of kit. And then from there, so I covered the Invictus Games UK trials, team trials, which were brilliant. And then I was asked to be the team videographer for a team of injured veterans that were taking on the Race Across America, which is the world's toughest cycling endurance race. And you go coast to coast across 13 states. We did it in 6.5 days. And so it was all the training weekends for them, and obviously being on the road, documenting their experiences. And so after that, I kind of went, oh, okay, well, I'm not going back to freelancing in newsrooms. I sort of seem to have a business sort of developing here. And so it was born really. And then obviously a lot of my network and connections were in the defence sector in various, aspects of with charities and events. So that seemed, to be the sensible route to sort of stay with. And then it's progressed into working with more businesses around that. A lot of my work still has some connection or other to the military, to the veterans community in one way or another. But yeah, so I've kind of taken those storytelling skills, I guess, which has been the theme sort of throughout my career, and now, work with businesses to tell their story and help them gain more clients themselves.
Absolutely. And I implore anyone to go to your newly launched website, which as of last night, and
went live about midnight last night. Yeah.
And I'm glad it did, because I found myself in a bit of a rabbit hole this morning through all your videos, and I'd implore anyone to go and look at some of the content, and particularly the documentary of the veterans doing the cycle across America. That's a brilliant 17-minute documentary or something like that. But that's great. And so what's next for you with the business? What's really what's on the horizon over the coming few months? What's the focus for you?
So I do, obviously, in terms of the content that's created, still work with, a lot of the veterans community. But I also employ as associates a lot of veterans and reservists when I need to upscale teams. So part of my sort of current work, I guess, on the business is about expanding that network and finding more good people to work with. So I work with a really good photographer. We do a lot of jobs together, and it's sort of expanding that network out. So for an award ceremony last year, there was a team of 13 of us working, and it was all veterans or reservists. So it was really nice to be able to assist them in their, transition, some of them into Civvy Street. So it's about supporting them. It's about, growing the business further. And I guess, COVID has provided a lot of us with the opportunity to diversify or just to rethink things a little bit. And so I have been doing a lot of networking and, working with smaller businesses and, who often think that video is beyond their reach and that they can't possibly afford, to bring somebody like me in to actually create content for them. So it's working with them to find ways that are affordable to work with a whole range of people. But, I still like doing the bigger corporate jobs as well, because, the nice balance. And hopefully off to another NATO exercise, hopefully later in the year as well. So. Absolutely.
Well, we hope we can help, and we hope to see you around at some of our networking events. I know you're Southwest London based, so you're right in the sweet spot for Network My Club and our membership. And alongside your business, you've also launched a podcast, and it's a business podcast with a really important angle. And it's really focusing on mental health within business leaders. And your objective is to source business leaders from some really top level businesses and talk about their vulnerabilities. So what was the inspiration behind starting that?
Well, it's presented by a veteran who has been diagnosed with complex PTSD, and we had met previously. We were connected on LinkedIn, and he was asking some questions about podcasting, and I offered to help him really, because I could see that it was I could see it was a really important issue and topic that he wanted to cover. And sorry, excuse me a second.
No worries.
And we, particularly at the moment, during the pandemic, mental health for most of us has been affected in some capacity or another. And in terms of business, particularly with bigger corporates, it's really important that conversation around mental health and safe spaces comes from the top. Because if people don't believe that they are in a safe environment where they can talk about how they're feeling, or they can talk, it doesn't have to be about mental illness. It can just be do you know what? Today, I'm just not quite firing on all cylinders. Give me a little bit of space and I'm sure, I will be back up, or I need this support, or I need a bit of time out, or whatever it is. We have interviewed a series of really senior executives from global MDs, somebody at PwC, people, Dean Stott, who is a former Special Forces soldier who's friends with Prince Harry. We've spoken to managing directors of companies. We have interviews lined up with people from Starbucks and Unilever. So we're really, we're interviewing really senior executives who are really being very open and honest about their mental health journeys and are really inspiring in terms of that. And actually the latest podcast episode, which came out on Wednesday, is from a chap called Nigel, who works at Sky Creative, and he's got bipolar. And I learned so much talking to him about his condition, how he manages it, the really sort of really manic depressive states, and then the really manic highs, and actually how that helps him with his creativity. So it's about teaching businesses that we're not all the same, but we are all human. And, part of that human condition, sometimes you might have a sore arm, sometimes you might just have a sore head. And, we need to support each other as best we can.
Absolutely. No, it's really refreshing because there's so many podcasts out there that talk about the successes and the wins and how to be the best, but not all allow people to be vulnerable and expose sort of their frailties, which I think is important as a trait as a leader. So before we let you go, we've got one more question that I can pick up from Simon Gregg at X-Tech. He's asked, anywhere that you wanted to go but didn't actually get the chance to go to report?
Yeah, two places actually. When I was in Afghanistan, I really wanted to go to Kajaki. If you've never heard of it, there's a movie called Kajaki. It's worth watching. But there was a big lake sort of area there, and everybody used to go swimming in it in the sunshine. So yeah, we really wanted to go there. We never made it, and to the Falklands. I never made it to the Falkland Islands, and I wish I had. It would have been great to see the work being done there, and also to see the penguins while being paid for it. But never mind.
Absolutely. Well, Kaija, we're going to have to end it there so we can get back onto the next part of the meeting. But I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure everyone else has as well. And really thankful for your time. And as I say, hopefully we'll see you around at some of the Network My Club meetings. And hopefully we can help you as you look to grow your business. But very inspiring. And we could have spoken for another hour at least, I'm sure. But for the time being, thanks very much, Kaija.
Thank you so much, Bradley. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Thanks.